Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. We are going to be talking this morning about disruption and why having your life disrupted can be a good thing. So give me just a minute while I sync up all the different aspects of technology here and get us started. Okay, all right, it is done. All right, good morning. I'm Dr. Karen Parker. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before, it is so nice to meet you. I know we've got some new people in our Quantum Human Design group, so I want to just personally welcome you and thank you for being part of our community and part of, I believe, an essential part of the evolution of the world, because when we start asking bigger questions like what is the meaning and purpose of my life, we are actually entertaining and engaging in questions that allow us to begin the process of shifting not only our inner and outer world, but the inner and outer world of the planet. So I am thankful and grateful for all of you, and thankful and grateful to be here on this beautiful morning with you all talking about a difficult topic. We're going to be talking today about disruption. And I'm going to give you probably a really big worldview, if you will, on what is disruption. But I'm going to start first by talking about what does disruption look like in your actual life. And then we'll go to the theory in a minute, but let's start with practical things. Disruption can be a health crisis. Disruption can be the end of an intimate relationship, breaking up with someone. Disruption can be finding inappropriate text messages on your partner's phone. Disruption can be losing a job. Disruption can be struggling with money and having a financial crisis. Disruption can be burnout, which is usually the most common form of disruption that we see a lot in our human design community. Disruption can be, on a collective level, can be government changes that feel discouraging or frightening or destabilizing. Disruption can be good too, by the way. We always talk about disruption as being bad. You can experience disruption when you have a new child, a new baby, or you can have a disruption when you get married. Basically, what I want you to think about when we think about what is disruption, that disruption means that you've outgrown your story. The story of who you are and how you are doesn't fit anymore. You might not realize that it doesn't fit anymore, and instead, and you're not consciously disrupting your life, but basically you have the experience in some way, shape, or form of oftentimes feeling like the rug just got pulled out from under you. That's sort of how it feels like when we get disrupted. So I want to bring us back to, again, as I said, I'm going to start with a big picture view, a historical view of where we are on the planet and where you might be at this time on the planet, and help you start to reframe your perspective on disruption and really help you look at how you can begin the process of using disruption as a catalyst for growth. Now, I will be referring to, over the course of this conversation, a workbook that I created for you. So Teresa's going to post the information for the workbook below. It's free. It's a workbook that I'm going to be referring to over the next couple of weeks every Friday. So join me here every Friday at 9 o'clock. We'll go through this workbook together so that you can begin to use whatever disruptions you might be experiencing as a conscious tool to support you in your growth and evolution. So in this workbook, we're going to be working through the first section. So I'm going to encourage you today to work through in the workbook at least through pages pages 1 through 9. So we're going to be working on pages 1 through 9 in the workbook. All right, so let's start with the big picture historical perspective on disruption. And I want to frame it in the context of human growth and evolution and human design. If you have been studying human design for a while, or even if you're really new to human design, you may have heard that the human design chart is changing, that we are literally slated for an upgrade, that Human 2.0 is supposed to start in 2027. And that means that who we are, how we are, the story of who we are as human beings is changing. Now, this isn't an idea that's unique to human design. If you have been in a spiritual community at all, of any kind, whether it's a traditional religious community or a relatively energetic spiritual community, we have been talking about what we call the shift, right? Or in more traditional religious terms, there are new worlds that are coming, cycles of rebirth that are happening. So this isn't just a unique human design idea. This is a universal idea that I think is playing out in many, many, many belief systems. Now, if we look at this evolution through the lens of human design, what we see, and bear with me here because I'm bringing us to what I think is the most important part about disruption. In human design, we see that we're on the edge of an era in consciousness. We are on the edge of the end of what we'll call the age of materialism and the beginning of the age of quantum consciousness. Now, let's be really clear. When we talk about cycles, it's not like we're going to go to bed one day and wake up the next day and poof, we're going to be in the next new era. This is an era that overlaps timing-wise, and these evolutionary cycles take a lot of time. They take hundreds of years to solidify, but we're kind of in the peak of this transition between these two eras. Now, the age of materialism basically is an age where we built a world based on the idea that the way in which we make things happen in the world is by moving the world around, right? It's a certain kind of limiting idea of cause and effect, right? And we've defined our world a lot around cause and effect, right? Especially when we start to think about ideas like, how do we create success in the world? Well, we have rules, cause and effect rules about success, right? Which is why so many of us are burned out, because we don't actually follow those rules anymore. They're too hard, right? So we have rules that say things like, if you want to be successful, you must work hard, have an education, know people, have resources, right? There's tons of those rules. I'm not going to list them all for us because I think it's a huge body of rules, but there are rules that basically say success equals cause. Success equals, all these, causes that create the effect of success. So we have cause and effect. What materialism also does for us, and this is the part that I think is the most interesting, and may I say maybe a little bit the most insidious, is that materialism, because it's all about measuring, materialism is all about measuring and understanding the material world through numbers and formulas, right? Cause and effect is a formula. But materialism has taught us to think in a binary way or in a polarized way. So materialism has us thinking about, it has us seeing and perceiving the world not only through the lens of cause and effect. If I do these things, I can have these things, right? But also through the lens of polarization. So polarization is have not, abundant or rich, poor, good, bad, male, female, black, white, Republican, Democrat. These are different ways in which we are polarized. Now, I'll tell you, polarization also includes right, wrong. And so when we start to think about our own lives in the context of cause and effect, and right, wrong, what happens to us oftentimes is when we go through a cycle of disruption in our lives, and there's no way around it. You are always going to go through a cycle of disruption. In fact, I will tell you, if you are not going through cycles of disruption, you're stagnant, you're probably bored out of your mind, and you're not growing. So as much as we might be like, I just want everything to stay the same, it probably won't, because it's part of being a human being, being an evolving being, that we go through cycles of disruption because, as I said in the very beginning, you've outgrown your story, right? You've outgrown your story. You're supposed to outgrow your story. You're not a baby anymore, right? You're not a teenager anymore. Some of you might not be 20 or 30 anymore, right? You are where you are because you've continued to evolve your story, right? And so when we start to think about disruption through the lens of cause and effect and good and bad, or however our polarization is, then what we start to internalize anytime we experience a disruption is the question, what did I do to screw this up, right? What did I do to screw this up? I lost my job. What did I do to screw this up? My partner has gone to other places and is no longer wanting to be in our partnership. What did I do to screw it up? It's a very hard, very small, sometimes very destructive lens through which to see cycles and seasons of disruption. We oftentimes think that when we've disrupted our lives, that we've screwed up. That and I'm not saying there isn't merit to exploring. Are there places here where you could learn? Are there things that happened here that you need to be accountable for? I'm not saying to skip that part, but I am saying that if we strictly look at it through the lens of what did I do to cause this and how did I screw this up, right? How did I get it wrong? Because wrong is the opposite of right, and that's polarized thinking. Then we oftentimes get stuck in cycles of disruption where the theme, instead of pushing us towards evolution, the theme keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. So we date the same person with the same issues, just in a different body, right? So I did that for years. Or we have a job, we hate the job, we lose the job, and instead of exploring, okay, how can this be a catalyst for my growth? We say, how did I screw this up? And then we go back and get a similar job that we also hate, but we're in this cause and effect modality and we can't see our way out, right? We get stuck in repetitive cycles where we keep doing the same thing again and again, only we try to get better at it. And that's not really necessarily the path to growth and expansion. And certainly, asking ourselves the question, what did I do to screw this up? And staying stuck in the, I made a mistake, I am a screw up, because that tends to be the next phase of how we define that. And then we stay stuck in an identity that says, I am a screw up, right? Then we're continuing to perpetuate that cycle in every area of our life. So, because I kind of want this to also be experiential for you as you listen to me today and as we work with the workbook, I want you to think about how could you reframe the disruption in your life right now. If you're in a cycle of disruption right now, how could you reframe it and start to explore the question, what am I here to learn from this experience? How is this experience in response to me outgrowing my old story? How is this experience in response to me outgrowing my old story? I can't tell you, as somebody who's been coaching people for more than 25 years, 26, 27 if I do the math, I can't tell you how many times I'll start working with a client, they'll tell me, I hate my job. And the next time they come to our session for coaching, they'll be like, oh my God, I got laid off, right? And the thing is, why did you get laid off? I mean, yeah, maybe something happened. Maybe there's an economic cause. Maybe there's whatever, right? But on a higher level, on an energetic level, that disruption has happened because you said, I'm not happy anymore. This isn't working for me anymore. I've outgrown this situation. I've outgrown this experience. Now, I'm going to bring us back to that theme at the end of my conversation with you here today. But I want to also talk about this same cycle of destruction through the lens. I said destruction, I meant disruption, but maybe destruction too. I want to look at it through the lens of systems theory. So particularly when we look at collective disruption, which right now we're in a massive collective disruption, and it doesn't matter what country you're in. No matter what country you're in, for the most part, except maybe Uruguay and Paraguay, which seem to have figured it out. If you are in a cycle of disruption, if you look at the world stage, we are in a collective cycle of disruption. It does. You don't have to look very far to see that there's just unrest, disruption, violence, terrible and interesting things happening on the planet right now. If we think of systems, and anything that has the word system in it, that's healthcare system, education system, government system, economic system. Systems are how we organize ourselves collectively. We are in a massive cycle of system disruption. And whenever we look at systems and how systems disrupt, a system will have a growth curve like this. It'll grow and grow and grow, and then it hits a plateau where it's kind of doing its best. It's the golden age, right? And then it starts to collapse. It's natural for systems to collapse, and they're supposed to, because at a certain point, because we are evolutionary beings, we outgrow the system. And whenever we outgrow a system, right, it starts to collapse. There is at the same time a new system emerging, and there's a crossroads between these old systems and these new systems as they start to grow into the next age, the next golden era, if you will. So this crossroads is where we are right now. We're really smack dab between an old era and a new era. And those crossroads cycles can feel very heavy and disruptive and very, very tense. So if you're feeling that right now, that's part of what's playing out in the collective or the global stage. Now, what'll also happen when we're in these cycles between the old and the new, and this can be personal too, is there's a tendency to want to go back to how things used to be. Right? That's part of the grief process, right? When we talk about denial as part of grief, right? And part of the grief process and part of the denial phase is we start bargaining, right? We're in denial, and then we start bargaining. Hey, if I just do this kind of thing, I can go back to how things used to be, right? We can go back to our world pre-COVID, right? It's kind of nice. That's a good thought sometimes, right? Here's the thing. When you go through a personal cycle of disruption, if you don't do the work that disruption assigns you, and it's an assignment, really, your soul is giving you an assignment when you have a cycle of disruption. If you don't do that work, and you bargain, and you try to figure out, how can I go back to how things used to be, and you don't resolve the grief, then you get stuck, again, back in those repeating cycles. Now, human design gives us interesting insights about grief and type. So when we look at the chart, I can look at the chart and take the layers of the chart down, and I'll post this for you later in a separate post. We can literally see that when we go through cycles of disruption, our human design type can predict where we sometimes might get stuck in the grief and not move forward in a cycle of disruption. If you are a manifestor or an initiator type, there's a tendency for you to grieve and get stuck in grief when you experience a loss of power and a loss of autonomy. Okay, so when you go through a disruptive cycle, if you lose your power or your sense of power or your autonomy, then you can get stuck in the grief there as a manifestor. Generators will grieve the loss of momentum. So if you feel like, oh, I was cruising along and things were clicking in place, and then I got stuck and I got on a plateau and then it all fell apart, as generators, you can grieve that loss of momentum. And so again, wherever we get stuck in our grief tends to be what we try to find, kind of immediately in a reactive way, rather than using that as an intentional pushing off point for growth. So let's say if you're a generator and you've lost your momentum and you're stuck in the grief of losing your momentum, then you might quickly go find something else to do, right? And that might not be necessarily the right thing if you haven't done the work of resolving the curriculum that disruption brings. Manifesting generators grieve loss of power and autonomy, because that's that manifestor part, right? And also the loss of momentum. Projectors can get stuck in the grief of losing their value. So if you are a projector and you go through a disruptive event that causes you to feel like you've lost your value, you aren't being recognized or seen for whatever reason, then you can get stuck in that grief as well. And certainly as a reflector, reflectors can get lost in the grief of losing their inner sense of being at home, feeling like they're in a place that feels at home. And they can spend a lot of time trying to recapture that sense of feeling at home. So certainly I would say pay attention to your grief by type, because that's oftentimes giving you clues where you might be stuck, but it's also giving you clues to what you really want, what you really need in the next growth cycle of your life. So if you're an initiator or a manifester, you need power and autonomy, and you need to grow that part. If you're a generator or an alchemist in quantum human design, then if you are grieving the loss of momentum, then you need momentum. If you are a manifesting generator and you're grieving the loss of power, autonomy, and momentum, then you know that in the next cycle of your life, in the next evolution of your story, you're going to need to make sure that you include power, autonomy, and momentum. As projectors, if you're grieving the loss of value, then you know that you need to include being valued or being in your value in the next cycle of growth. Whatever it is you're seeking to create next, it needs to include your value. And for reflectors, in that next cycle, in that next season of growth, you need to recover and find a new place, a new space, a new inner space that feels like home. So the grief and that loss can also give us really important clues as to what do we need to include in our vision of what we want to build next. So many times when I work with people through cycles of transformation and we're doing transformational coaching, you know, the big thing that people bring to the table is, I don't know what I want. I don't know what's next. I don't know what's next for me. And we sometimes forget that our outer world and our inner experience is often reflecting back to us, maybe not always what we want, but it's certainly clarifying to us sometimes what we don't want, right? And that's actually a good pushing off point for clarifying what you do want, right? If you don't want to feel powerless anymore, then that's clearly showing you that what I want is to feel powerful instead, right? And so certainly I would say if you're in a cycle of disruption right now and you're sort of asking yourself, what's next? Where do I go next? What do I want? I don't know what I want, right? For you to start taking stock of, well, what's going on in your life that you don't want right now, that you don't like right now, and look at what's the opposite of that. Because that's oftentimes going to give you some really good clues and cues as to what's maybe next for you. What do you want? So I said at the beginning that I was going to give you a little bit of a reframe on disruption and the process of transformation that is catalyzed in cycles of disruption. Because again, the cycle of disruption is not necessarily something you did to cause you to blow up and screw up your life. So can we all start with, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I forgive myself for blowing up my life. I forgive myself for self-destructing. I want to acknowledge and honor that I might have destroyed my life because I am ready for something bigger and better. I am ready for something that is more worthy of who I really am. My story didn't fit me anymore. And so on maybe on an unconscious level, on a psychic level, I took down my life because I'm ready to grow. I'm ready for something better, something more worthy of me. So let's talk about a new definition of transformation. And hopefully this will give you a little bit of a reframe that can continue to support you on your journey of self-forgiveness and maybe even empowerment in this season of disruption. So what if instead of saying, I screwed up my life, I blew it up, I self-sabotaged, right? What if we start saying to ourselves, I've outgrown my story, right? I've outgrown my story. And I am now in an intentional cycle of transformation. And this cycle of transformation is me, my higher self, operating in pursuit of meaning. And the purpose of this transformation is spiritual growth and evolution. Okay? Transformation is the pursuit of meaning. And the purpose of this transformational cycle is spiritual growth and transformation. Okay, you're being given an opportunity to take back control of your reality, to learn new ways to steer the cosmic forces in your favor, right? That's transformation. Obviously, disruption is the beginning of the process. And over the next few weeks, I'm going to introduce you to 3 key cycles that take you from disruption to expansion, to that fulfillment of a new sense of meaning and purpose in your life. And let's again go back to reframing our understanding of disruption and say the purpose of disruption is to initiate a process of amplifying and embodying meaning in your life and catalyzing spiritual growth. You all are getting my early morning notes from my journal, okay? So when we look at seasons of disruption, a season of loss, a season of burnout, a season of challenge, health challenges, political challenges, work challenges, creative challenges, whatever those challenges might be that cause us to feel like the rug has been pulled out from under us, if we instead release ourselves from the inner conversation of what did I do to screw up? How did I screw this up? Why did I self-sabotage? Again, I'm not saying don't take stock of the circumstances. There's certainly something there to be learned from those questions, but don't stay stuck there. To really train yourself to say, okay, if this is a symptom of me having outgrown my story, what is it in my story that is wanting to grow? What is the disruption amplifying? What is it causing me to have to reevaluate so that I can become better at embodying meaning, the true meaning of my purpose, my authentic alignment with my true story, and how is it catalyzing my spiritual growth? If we just simply reframe our perspective on that disruption, go through the grief. Obviously, you have to go through the grief. There's always an acute phase in that disruptive cycle that is raw and painful and vulnerable. I'm not saying don't go through that phase. We have to, right? That's part of resolving the grief. Don't get stuck in the grief, but start asking yourself when you get to that point where you're ready to say, okay, what's next? Where you begin to assess, all right, if this is a symptom of me having outgrown my story, and I am now ready to amplify and embody higher meaning and purpose in my life, and I am in a cycle and a season of catalyzing spiritual growth, what's next for me now? What does this mean for me now? How can I use this understanding as a prayer for expansion that's going to support me in recreating, resetting my life so that it's in greater alignment with my authentic self? All right, I have created a workbook for you, as I said, and I'm going to encourage you. Teresa's going to post the link below. She already has, but you make sure you find the link below. Encourage you to get your copy of this workbook and start working on pages 1 through 9. What you'll see in that workbook is a brief description in the beginning pages of what is disruption and what are the seasons and cycles associated with disruption and transformation. And then you're going to see a list of contemplations that I want to invite you to work on this week. And basically what it's asking you is to take stock of where are you right now? What is going on in key areas of your life, your relationship, your health, your wellness, your work, your creative fulfillment, even your relationship with Source. It's not, and I want to be really clear, I'm having you look at where you are right now, not because I want you to beat yourself up, okay? Not because I want you to feel bad about where you might be right now. That's not the goal. The goal is for you to start getting a very clear awareness of where are you right now? What has disruption brought to you? What awarenesses are being reflected back to you? What is this reflection of this disruptive cycle showing you in the context of what you want and what you don't want? Or maybe I should say what you don't want and then what you want, right? So that you can begin to start the process of building a vision for what's next, which is what we're going to be talking about next Friday. So do your homework this week, get your copy of your workbook, take some time to really reflect on maybe what has been disrupted, explore where maybe you need to forgive yourself and be empathetic and compassionate with yourself, about the circumstance that you're in. Acknowledge and celebrate yourself for being so brilliant and so wise that you blew up a situation that doesn't fit you anymore. Good job, right? And then to really ask yourself, what do I want? And if you don't know the answer to that, that's okay. We'll work more on that next week. But at the very least, start looking at what don't you want and using that as a pushing off point to clarify what else might be possible for yourself and your life right now. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. Next week, 9 o'clock Central Time Friday next week, we'll go and talk about the next season in the disruptive cycle. Do go get your copy of the workbook and join me back here next Friday. Also, if you're new to our group, again, welcome. Do make sure you watch on Monday. Tara will post all the activities for next week. Next week, we've got Transit Tuesday. On Tuesdays, I go through the celestial weather. Wednesdays, Hannah's here talking about whatever our theme is for the week. Teresa is here, usually on Fridays, doing amazing, amazing creative work, giving you all kinds of really inspiring insights into contemplations and journaling exercises and creativity exercises. Get your copy of the workbook. Thank you for being here. And this is a new moon with a partial solar eclipse tonight. So use this energy tonight to really start exploring the question, what do you want? It's a good time for us to really be deep into that question. So thank you. Have a great weekend. Be well. Bye.